women are like me or my friends are sitting in interviews, job interviews, and they ask us, yeah, do you have a partner? When do you plan your family?
It is a reality that women get pregnant and that they're going to be out of the workforce for a certain period of time. From the employer standpoint, what would you really have them do?
An employer legally cannot pay a member of the armed forces less or remove their position during times of military service, for instance, right? And that standard exists, and there's no discussion around, hey, you know, what if they're not going to come back as skilled, or what if they're not going to come back as, you know, qualified to do a particular role because they've had X amount of time away from it. But that's simply because that has been codified into law.
Welcome to Radius of Reason. I'm Levon with my co-host, Andrey.
This is episode 28, and we've got a really good episode for you. Today, we talk to German science reporter Pati Brueggemeier. She is also a feminist. We discussed feminism and if women's liberation has made women happier, if it's made our civilization better off, and if the gender pay gap is real.
Okay, Pati, what is feminism?
Feminism, in general speaking, is the belief in social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. And over the years, you can say like feminism has focused on different issues like the right to vote, reproductive and sexual freedom, and also equal pay. And those are like basic issues, but it goes far beyond those basic rights. It seeks like deeper cultural changes and a shift in society, like the end to sexism in general, and also the intersectional oppression based on gender, race, sexuality, and class. It seeks to change that. That basically speaking like that women and men are the same and have the same rights. That's the goal.
I feel like feminism has successfully incorporated men. I mean, is this a movement or belief system that should span all or the spectrum of gender and sexuality? I mean, the things you referenced in your definition are things that I think both men and women would agree on, right? I mean, you called out class. That's not something that is particularly unique to one gender or the other. So do you think that feminism has done a good job of universalizing the movement as opposed to maybe making it exclusively for female participants?
Andre, I really appreciate your question. But to be really honest, the first question about feminism should not be, does it include the man? Are the men included enough? Like, don't get me wrong. It's also important to include all genders, but feminism is also about like including all, but it's called feminism because it's really about women this time. It's about like if men are here and women here, it's about lifting those up that they are on the same level.
Perfect.
And men are already there, so it's a bit less about men in this case, but yeah.
Pati, I do think men are still pretty relevant to the feminism discussion because I think both sexes need each other and they feed off each other, and they, you know, we live in a society with both sexes. So I think I don't think Andrei's point is entirely irrelevant, but maybe let's save that for a later part of the discussion. What I want to ask you though is, okay, so when it comes to women and some of the inequality, would you say like the gender pay gap, for example, is kind of like one of the top issues?
Defining the top issues of feminism is like what is important for people. Like the top issue could be like that the payment is not equal, of course, but the top issue could be also like that women don't feel safe on the streets. Or recently we had like the International Women's Day, or the Day Against Violence Against Women, and with the facts that For example, in Germany, every don't get me, like every fourth woman is a victim of domestic violence by their ex-partners. Like that could be one of the top issues, that it's really not safe for women. But of course, equal pay is also a big issue. But yeah, it depends how you want to put meaning on it.
A quick note on the safety thing. I think, was it in Mexico recently? Maybe it was last summer, actually. There was a huge strike by the women because they were getting assaulted and harassed in the subway, right? Is this somewhat related to that as well? Or is this kind of an annual thing that's been happening?
Of course, like, I'm happy that you mentioned Mexico, because Mexico is one of the countries with the highest rate of femicides, like murder that are conducted because of the sex of a person, like the because of being a woman they are killed, and that is like one of the highest numbers in Mexico. And in Mexico also the harassment situation is really fatal. So that's why they have those protests and I think for me the safety is like one of the biggest questions or the biggest issues concerning feminism.
What do you see as potential solutions to that? Is it just an education problem, or what more could be done? Because it seems like there's a fundamental asymmetry between men and women, in that the vast majority of men can, quite frankly, kill the vast majority of women, and the opposite is not true of the vast majority of women being able to just with their bare hands kill a man. So what, apart from education, like what could you do with this asymmetry? Not just in physical capacity, but also men tend to be more aggressive than women, and more violent than women. Like the mass majority of of violent criminals are men, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's also like a really big question, because what can we do to stop femicides? It's like, yeah, that would be key. I really would love to have the solution, but it's a lot more complex than having like one answer, one solution, because it's based on like gender stereotypes and how people are raised, how boys are raised, how girls are raised, and how the patriarchy is involved in our brains, in my brain, in your brain. It's like, it's how we think, how we act, and it would like we would have to start, of course, in the first steps of education and change a lot about values, about behavior, and it's a really huge question where it's not one.
Can we single out the bit about the patriarchy? I'm curious how you would link the patriarchy and the things that have been done systemically in the name of patriarchy to contribute to violence against women. Like, I want you to tease that apart, not just with the reality of men being, again, more aggressive and being more violent. But what has this patriarchy in particular what have they done, or what has it done rather, to contribute to this problem?
The contribution is like, if you value a woman not like a woman but more like a thing or something minor, then there's not just respect that is missing. And I think that's the fundamental problem with the patriarchy, and that also leads to violence if you don't see each other like equal, but to a thing that you can hurt, that you can harass, you can kill in the end. Then patriarchy leads to really, really dangerous behavior towards women.
Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us, please like and subscribe the video if you're watching on YouTube. Please make sure to reach out to us on Twitter and or X at radius_of. Drop us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. Now, when you were giving your definition, it almost seemed like you were offering up like a globalist perspective on the feminist movement. And certainly there are some common themes independent of if you're in Mexico, somewhere in Southeast Asia, or in Northern Europe, right? That there's a common sense of a struggle against a certain established system that I suppose in this context we'll describe as the patriarchy. Do you generally feel that the feminist movement is a global concept, or is there a particular nuance for respective issues as it relates to maybe geographic or cultural locations?
Could you repeat your question? Like, if the patriarchy is like geographically?
Yeah, if it's a global concept, or if it's maybe, if we can think about it as more like a localized thing. Is feminism, let's say, in Western Europe, going to be facing different problems than feminism in North America, for instance?
Of course, like feminism faces different problems regarding the regions, but patriarchy is a concept that is like all over the world. It's in our brains. It's in our society. That is, it is there, and of course, like in different regions, it's different. And while I was traveling, I also perceived like different stages of feminism, or the absence of feminism. For example, in my country, Germany, in my city, it's really normal that all my friends are feminists, or I'm really surrounded really in a bubble. And here, when I'm traveling, I sometimes I had to explain what I mean with feminism and what I mean with equal rights, or I had to explain basic definition of patriarchy. But that people don't know about it, that doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means that education about it is missing, or that that we have to work on it in a different word.
So I asked that question because oftentimes, in considering like the patriarchy maybe as like a socioeconomic concept, we're very much deep in the era of globalization, of kind of the universalization of finance capitalism, where can we link the concept of patriarchy to like the sort of singular global economic system that we live in, or are they detached and we should consider them separately, if that makes sense?
It's totally connected. Lately, I read the book of Simone Beauvoir. Like she also like said like capitalism kind of led to patriarchy in that sense, because when people didn't have like, when people started to say, okay, this land is mine, and this woman is like, this is my wife, and this is my, at that moment when you want to define things like yours and mine, and you have to also make sure that your ancestors or the following generations like keep the land, the goods you have, and that's really linked to oppress like also women, because with this time it started that women stayed at home or took care of children, and men said, okay, you belong to me and I have the power now. And so power and patriarchy, and also money and belongings and capitalism is closely linked.
So just a really quick follow-up on that, and I have to ask, so you mentioned you're from Germany. Do you think that the history of Germany with the GDR, East Germany, and its integration back into Western Germany has played a role of how women's rights evolved in Germany after the Cold War, for instance, right? Where the GDR, for all intents and purposes, we're not going to get into the good versus bad of the two economic models, but we could say that for things like women in STEM, for instance, which in the U.S. that's still one of the major kind of banner issues that feminism grapples with, how to get women into, fields of engineering or the sciences. In East Germany, that was almost like a standard, right? It was women were almost fully integrated in like the technical workforces. When the countries joined together, do you think that has contributed to this phenomena you described, where your immediate circle in your hometown, everybody tends to be up to a certain standard when it comes to women's rights, women's issues? Has that played a role at all in how Germany has evolved?
It's a really interesting question. If the system is really affecting that, and from my perspective, I cannot really tell it, but I can tell you that even though I said like in my personal bubble there's more feminism and more stuff like this, but in the history, and that I can speak for like Western Germany and Eastern Germany, and also today there's is a lack of feminism. And just to have like a few key facts, like since 1958, like women are allowed to get a driver's license without the husband's permission. Since 62, they can open an own bank account without the husband's permission, and they also working without the husband's permission. Like, is possible since 1977. Like, generally speaking, that sounds like, okay, it's in the past. But for example, my mom had to ask my dad if she can open a bank account, if he's okay with working. Also, like, a crazy fact that makes me so mad, like, rape is punishable in marriage since 1997. And still, politicians are in power that voted in 1997 that it should not be punishable 26 years ago. And they are still in power.
As in, if a woman is raped within the concept, like by her husband, there is
exactly.
Okay, no legal consequence for that.
And that was okay. That was considered as okay until 1997. And also, like, crazy facts, like, okay, to just look a bit further to Switzerland, like women's suffrage, like the right to vote was introduced in the last canton in Switzerland in 1990. That means like it's crazy because it's really not that far away. We all talk about like, in the history, many things have changed and we are there and we have some friends that are feminists, but that does not, that does not make the bigger picture like this. It's more like we have to work on many things, but to give a bit of insights of German history of feminism, and that was in both sides, East and West.
But thankfully there has been progress, and I think it's good to acknowledge that, because those are pretty awful things, and likewise in the U.S., likewise in my home country of Armenia. I think the biggest issue is that there's a general maybe lack of respect towards women in a lot of maybe traditional cultures. Not in the sense that the men don't like care and love the women. I think most men tend to be, I think they tend to really care about maybe their partner or their daughters, whomever. But it's probably like some subconscious thing, maybe just a product of evolution, where there is this aura, there's this ether that surrounds men's perception of women as maybe being a little bit lower in status. And that may have to do with like resource acquisition, again, early on in human evolution. But I do think that's the biggest challenge from my perspective, from a man's perspective. Like, that's the biggest challenge, is to overcome some of the cultural perceptions and prejudices against women. But I want to speak more concretely about some of the issues like the gender pay gap. So maybe we can start there. And this is something that I kind of looked into. I didn't really. I heard both sides of the argument. Obviously, that there's this big gender pay gap from the feminist side, and then from the more conservative side, they're saying there's more or less no pay gap, and that this is a myth. From my research,
who said that is a myth? Like
people that tend to be more on the right, I would say.
But that, I mean, okay, but we just have to acknowledge like basic facts that are numbers. We don't like.
Right. So I did look into it, and maybe my research isn't perfect, and feel free to correct me. But from what I saw, you've got uncontrolled and controlled, assessments of the pay gap, and so controlled assessments would be like accounting for pregnancy leave, right? And so if you look at uncontrolled data, then it's like 82 cents to the dollar that women make. But when you control for things like women being out of the workforce due to pregnancy, it's about 99 cents to the dollar, which is pretty close, and suggests that this is not as significant of an issue as what I typically hear feminists make it out to be. That's not to say that in specific industries that there isn't a pay gap. In fact, I believe in like bartending, there's actually a pretty big pay gap between men and women in favor of men. But then there's also other industries, like in tech, which I've seen, again, according to some research, that women make more than men. So what do you have to say about that? And like, am I looking at the wrong stats here? Because I'm not seeing this overall huge pay gap that feminists typically kind of talk about.
I'm glad that in this context you mentioned like the few exceptions where women earn more. I mean, it's refreshing. I mean, but in general speaking, it's like this. It's the pay gap exists, and even though if you like leave out all the pregnancy, like all the pauses that are taken by women by pregnancy, it's still there. Like women are the ones who are giving birth, and we cannot ignore that fact. I mean, they are discriminated because of this. Even today, people say, okay, no, you're a woman, we prefer men because in 2 years you will get pregnant. Or women are like me or my friends are sitting in job interviews, and they ask us, yeah, do you have a partner? When do you plan your family? And there's this like questions which are not encountered by like men. Do not encounter those questions. They are just men. They are also not working like they also have to talk about a bit like how we which words we use, like working mom. Have you ever heard of a working dad? Like that's not an expression that really exists. It's always like the discrimination is there, and the pay gap is also there, even though we say like, if we leave out the pregnancy pauses and stuff, then but it's there, and people wants to
okay. So I'm just curious from the employer standpoint. What would you have them do? Because if it is a reality that that women get pregnant and that they're going to be out of the workforce for a certain period of time, and actually, in my opinion, I think women should be afforded much more time to be out of the workforce, and they should be ideally compensated for that. But anyhow, like from the employer standpoint, what would you really have them do? Just ignore the fact that, well, now not only does this pose an issue in terms of staffing, but also when they return, well, they don't have as much experience as, say, a man that would have continued to work. Would you say that the employer should artificially prop up their salary, or do you think there are other ways to compensate for this discrepancy between men and women?
I really think that they should be less. There should be in general less discrimination, but of course they should be more open to new concepts that also like they accept that if a dad says, okay, I want to take care of my newborn baby, that they should allow that and they should be open for that and they have work structures and just be a bit open about new family structures that it could happen in the future. But right now it is like this, that the majority of women take in a pause and suffer because they cannot proceed in their careers
and Patti, maybe to contextualize your point just a little bit, there is a not entirely similar, but there's some intersection with how employers must legally treat members of the military, at least in the United States. I don't know what the situation is like in the European Union, for instance, but an employer legally cannot pay a member of the armed forces less or remove their position during times of military service, for instance, right? And that standard exists, and that there's like no discussion about that from a standpoint of like, oh yeah, like of course, like members of the military, they go and they serve their country or something like that, and they return back to the workforce, and they must be guaranteed a job in a similar pay in a similar role as when they departed. And there's no discussion around, hey, you know, what if they're not going to come back as skilled, or what if they're not going to come back as qualified to do a particular role because they've had X amount of time away from it. But that's simply because that has been codified into law. So the question is this a gap we have on a legal basis, or is this something intrinsically tied into how companies think about women, and maybe it's a clash between more evolved societies where, yes, we've welcomed women into the workforce, but the mindset maybe hasn't fully changed in terms of how we actually think about women and their role in society. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Thank you for your point, Andrew, because it shows that it's possible. Like, it's totally possible to treat people who take a break from the work and come back at the same position and can continue their career. It means just like people don't want it, people are not used to it, used to that thought. And I feel that way if a man and a woman start to decide to start a family and get a children, they not just the women should be the one suffering about the consequences in the work. It's just like that. And if we continue like this and say like, okay, let's wait, let's see, I think really some legal difference have to be made, because if we continue like this, the gender pay gap will not be closed until 2088. It's like I personally don't want that my children one day also.
We're all going to be out of work by then anyways. We'll be replaced by robots.
If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe, follow us on all the different platforms, like and comment, and back to the show.
But Patti, I did really quickly want to double click on something. And this goes back to something you mentioned, that you would support paternity leave, higher rates of paternity leave, increased opportunities for men if they choose to, take extra time to spend time with their newborn child, to bond, et cetera, et cetera. Is this not an example of where feminism could indeed serve the interests of both men and women? Because I don't suspect any man would object to legally protected rights to take 3-4 months off of work to spend time with their newborn child. So is this, again, somewhere, I mean, you mentioned initially when we started talking that, feminism isn't about men. It's about equalizing the distance between the genders have on like a societal basis. However, there does seem to be a point of intersection here.
Don't get me wrong. Feminism is about like men and women. We have to equalize both. Both are included. That's like the point. We have to include women to get on the same level as men. That means that both are included. But like, I was just confused by the first question. Like, what about the men?
Exactly. Came in with, but what then? Yeah.
That was it. But you're completely right. We have to involve men in all of the feminist movement, and men has to be feminist. And I was not just referring to like they can also take a break to get a bit to get to know their newborn a bit. I was really thinking about they can do like the 2-3 years break off raising the child. Like it totally works, and some people are already doing it, but in general, society is not really open for it because it always has been like this. But I think not only companies but also like society should be more open to it.
I think what's interesting is our current economic structure doesn't value things like women or men taking time off to raise their kids. Like there is no way to kind of, I don't know, produce like something measurable in terms of GDP, from that, which is a tragedy, and I think that impacts family units, and I think that impacts the quality of people raising their kids and that aspect. I'm curious if you think like there should be, I mean, you probably would agree with this, but some sort of at least tax benefits or some sort of incentive structure that, and again, I think this mostly, impacts women, but if a woman takes time off to raise their kids, like it should not be looked down upon. It should be rewarded heavily, whether she wants to continue to work later on or she just wants to be a stay-at-home mom. Like we have to find a way to fit that into our economic systems, which right now it's just like from the standpoint of capitalism, there's more or less no value to a woman staying home and raising their kids. Yeah. But obviously it has huge societal impacts.
Because capitalism and feminism goes not hand in hand. Like it's it doesn't work. But you're completely right. Like it should be like so much more rewarding of the work that the person who raised the kid, in best case the man and the women, does, because that is our future, not just on the capitalistic economic side of view. It's like the future of us, of society. But taxes that would favor like people who raise the kids are really an interesting point. And in this sense, I would like to mention also another tax that is important to see when we're talking about gender pay gap, because even though women earn less and are discriminated in certain fields, they have to pay more for certain projects. It's called the pink tax. So the tax you mentioned that treats women differently exists, but for their disadvantage. Like the pink tax means that it refers like to a tendency for product market specifically towards women to be more expensive than those marketed products towards men. It exists for many, many products and means like women in general have to pay more. It refers to many products, but also like period products. I don't know if you guys have heard about the period poverty. If you know that.
I don't think so. Maybe elaborate on that.
That's like a global issue affecting on those who needs to buy products for their menstruation and for their period, and that can really lead to poverty, because we like there's so much poverty in this earth, and if you don't have like a economic, a really good well-seated situation, period, like a really natural thing, can be a risk for poverty for girls and for women. And yeah, I think we should all consider this when we talk about gender pay gap, inequality in payment, that it's not like women and men, men earn more, women less, and they have to pay more for certain things because there are taxes based on the patriarchy, like, or coming from the patriarchy, and people don't really question it, they accept it. And that's where we should start thinking about, like, returning those taxes in favor for women, that they I really liked your idea that we could like do taxes but in favor for women.
Is one of the solutions to the pink tax is, there's some overlap in products between men and women. Women should just buy like men's shaving products and put out of business, like just put out of business the companies that aren't respecting, the the unique situation of women, and are trying to capitalize on that. Maybe I don't know what it is. Maybe there's some psychological predisposition or something that might compel a woman to want to use something that is, I don't even know, just marketed in a certain way for them. But maybe
it's 100%
punish
marketing. I think it's 100%.
Yeah, of course. Like, I mean, I love it. It's like a short-term protest move to just put out those companies who are like that sexist and have those pink taxes. But like, you have to also consider that some products don't exist for men. Like, you have to buy that for a woman, and they are overpriced, and that's just not how it works. Especially
I'm curious.
The gender.
So I'm curious, like, if a conservative is listening to this right now, they might be thinking like a couple of things. So one, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to constrain the free market? Are you going to prevent the free market from operating in its, full capacity? And then also, like, things like, we were talking about, more paid leave for women and men, to raise their kids. They might be like, well, what about the economic implications? What about the employer? Can they actually afford that? So if I want to steelman the case from the conservative side, it might be that the negative impacts of these changes to the economy would cause an overall negative impact on society as compared to the benefits. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that is an argument I could see somebody making. And then I think, I guess first, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Both you and Andres, I'm curious.
Andrey, go first. I'm talking
I've been trying to find a way to inject this into the conversation. I'm glad we're coming back to this topic. I think that what we have to consider when it comes to the economic impacts of, let's say, feminist policy, it's the demographic crisis. And that is the looming threat that I think the capitalist markets are going to have to react to eventually. I don't know if the U.S. is quite on the scale of countries like Japan, where there's a geriatric population and new generations aren't having as many children. But we're starting to see this in the U.S. where because women want to be more competitive in the workforce, and because of things that Pati mentioned, that maybe job interviews, they'll try to like suss out like, hey, like, when are you planning on having a child and whatnot. I think women tend to have less and less children within certain categories of society based on education, cross sections and things like that. But eventually it's going to come to a point, and I think we're seeing this in places like Poland, where even more conservative mindsets are going to have to allow a level of flexibility when it comes to women's rights in the workplace, for instance, even men's rights in the workplace to a certain extent, because there is a looming freak out of when it comes to net population declines within places like the United States. So possibly that will be what gives us the point of resolution, or it will send us down a totally chaotic conservative path. And what's that sci-fi series? Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's really bad. I'm happy that you mentioned the demographic change, and that's a really big, a big implication that should be considered when we're giving an answer to your question, Yvonne, because we have to consider that especially women with academic backgrounds, women who did studied years in the university and have good jobs, don't want to lose those jobs, and then decide, okay, I will focus myself on my career and I won't have children. I also know many friends of mine who decide like this because they see all the job discrimination and they're like, okay, if I really want to succeed, I really have to take a path. And we should, I'm really convinced that we should build a world, and also a job world, where we don't have to choose a path, where all the women with academic background or not can choose whatever path, but being able to unite a family with their work, like how it's possible for men. Men don't have to really think about those things, and I would really love that women could have the same chances, and especially if we want to give the think in an economic way, that if we want to increase our economy, it's really important that we have children who are who are raised in a certain way, that they are open, that they are also feminists, that they are also no, I can do whatever I like. If I'm born as a girl, I don't have to wear pink and do certain jobs that are stereotypes. I can also be a pilot, a lawyer, whatever. And that in fact, if we create a certain openness in this field of work, I think it's it would open up a lot of chances in terms of democratic factors, but also that women also feel the possibility to get any job they want, and that for me is more a chance or a benefit for the economic situation.
Well, and maybe this is where I would chime in with kind of not necessarily a steelman argument, but the most common, and I don't digest too much conservative media, but what I've seen out of the tragic Ben Shapiro circles is this kind of point that's made that feminist movements globally tend to accept that viewpoint that yes, everybody should have a choice to work in whatever career field they want, and yet certain fields women don't appear to have any interest in working in. When it comes to the trades, right, working as a plumber or working as a construction worker in sweltering heat in suburban Arizona, I mean, these jobs are shit for everybody. So but we don't really tend to talk when we say women in STEM, women in the engineering fields. It's more along the lines of we should allow women to go get higher level degrees so that they can work in management positions for this. But should we also open up the horizons for women to work in the toiling fields, right? That they can be a sanitation worker or something like that.
Of course, of course. I mean, it's also the other way around. It's also the other way around that women should have the right to have access to any kind of job, not just we talked about increasing the economy. So I talked about higher jobs in this case, but it's that. If we consider where women work, mostly it's a lot of care jobs that they do, and I think we should be totally open to this, that women also can work in those kind of fields. Here, for example, I a little story. I saw a sign traveling that said hombres trabajando, which means like
Working men at work.
working men. Here, they don't pretend to involve everyone. It's just men working, and so the sign really says, and yeah, working men. And I really had to laugh, but then I thought about it and was like, yeah, okay, that's why like never a woman chose this kind of field, this kind of career, so to speak, for them, because yeah, those paths are really like already
Patty, have you heard of the gender equality paradox?
No, tell me, please.
So it's this idea that as societies kind of become more gender equal in terms of rights and economics and whatnot, it turns out that there is a larger kind of difference in some of the occupations that men and women choose. So instead of having a more equal distribution of, let's say, men and women in engineering fields, you actually see a higher difference. And so I guess I'm curious, from your standpoint, is the goal of the feminist movement to try to come to some like optimal ratio between men and women in certain fields, or what's the goal, right? Because we see like in Scandinavian societies, you do see a wider difference than in societies where they have less equality on other grounds.
Okay, that's really interesting. It's also like a new fact for me. And it's true, like in Scandinavian societies, really cool that you mentioned Scandinavia, because they really, okay, just like this, and then I come back to the question, just like fact about
Sure.
when I was in Denmark, I spoke to the people and they told me that here they in Denmark they wanted to like people to have children like in a young age, why studying, and they like got all the support you can imagine from the state, like got so much money, so much help, so much openness concerning like that also men can do the work with the child and stuff like, and it really worked. I was in the streets and I just saw young people with children. It was like, and it was also really, really normal to just see men with the
Stroller, yeah.
Exactly. And that gives for me hope that it could work. And also, like, I coming back to your question, I personally don't think that is feminism does not want to achieve that women get like a higher payment. That's not the goal. Like what I said in the beginning, that the goal of feminism is really like equalize it. So
sorry, just to be clear, I don't mean in terms of like payment, in terms of the number of women in a particular field or industry. Like say the number of women that are scientists or engineers. Like is feminism trying to equalize the ratio? Like do they really, like, would they say it's unequal until there's just as many male engineers as female engineers? Or is it only about the opportunity to become an engineer for a woman, which I would suspect should be the case?
Yeah,
but
it's more about the opportunity, but it's more like also about changing the minds, like changing the minds at the like in the whole process of being a child, and like what are your interests, what are allowed, what are you allowed to as a girl to have kind of interest. It should be like all really open and all really possible. So it's really about those opportunities that should be equal. And if at the end it's really medio, then it's fine. But we cannot predict it, because right now we live in a world where women do certain jobs and men.
Sure. And there's one quick thing that I wanted to circle back to, something that Andrey mentioned earlier about the declining birth rates, and this is something that we've seen in Western nations, a lot of developing country, or the most developed countries. Do you think, as women, have now kind of been given the freedom to pursue careers and to pursue other things, and have economic power, and just have a wider set of potential aspirations? There's just more a woman can aspire to and be now. Is there an inherent tension between that and having kids? I mean, beyond the fact that having kids can impact your career, and I agree with both of you that making sure that women don't feel that way is going to be helpful in terms of having them be more comfortable having kids. So I think that, again, that is helpful, but I don't know if that's like a full solution to this issue of birth rates. And so kind of two questions. One is, again, do you view that there's an inherent tension between the freedom and all the possibilities that women have now in raising kids, where the idea of raising kids is just less appealing? And then two, from a long-term standpoint, like, is this sustainable? If there is a tension, how is this sustainable? Because you have cultures that are more conservative, more traditional, maybe more religious, like Mormons or other religious groups, where they're going to just, they're going to out baby, the feminists. So, like, is this a stable strategy, in the long run?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you really found the most important point, right? Because if women have all the rights and can do whatever they want, why should they decide for a path where they get most discriminated and most disadvantages? And so, of course, there's a connection. There is a connection, and like I mentioned before, like I, for example, have friends who said, like, no, I know how the world works right now. I would love to have it like in a different way, but I know if I want to succeed in my career, I cannot have a big family, because that at this point in this world does not work. And of course that brings the risk that we don't have enough children in the future, and also for a more, you said, conservative or okay, I don't think like the kids of the Mormons will take over and we have a problem. But it's really important that for
Are you sure they have like 16 kids?
Yeah, they all
like,
speak like
sure?
60 foreign languages. Like, they're all well educated. Like, I don't know.
They have a lot of kids, Patty. Like, honestly, yeah, I wouldn't be too confident about that.
That's also the question. Like, if the woman really wants to have 16 kids or wants to have the birth control, like what?
Sure.
16 kids.
It is kind of.
Imagine.
Levon, I like what you're saying, because it is almost sort of the liberation paradox, right? That when you provide opportunities for women to fully function in society, let's say this is leading to a decrease in birth rates, although I think it's a bit more complicated than that, because there's healthcare systems, all this kind of stuff. But we all agreed on a point that we want to create a society down the line where everybody has the opportunity to pursue whatever they see fit in terms of their life, work, happiness, whatever. But if those sorts of people are not having children, the ones that subscribe to that ideology and believe in that type of future, and circles that maybe view the world more conservatively and certainly view women as having a certain role in society, are having more children, there is this kind of paradox that if those circles are having children, they're raising their children in that kind of mindset, it is eventually going to, I don't know, let's talk about from like a democratic standpoint, you'll have more voters that vote against women's rights or policies that support women in the workplace, which I haven't thought about it that way, and it does introduce a pretty difficult kind of concept to think through to a certain extent.
Yeah, like, you're completely right, and I also see that problem, and also kind of fear that problem, that people who really want to make a difference, of course, also need to have children, who wants to make this different, in order to really create a different society where all those feminist thoughts and also like this way of life is possible for everyone. It really reminds me of the discussion where people who really fear what climate change will do to the planet, what they think about having a family, having kids, because it's also this kind of paradox, because they at one point they don't want to have more difficulties for the planet, so to speak, with having more children. But at the same time, it's important to have kids, to teach the values to the kids, and also that the kids can find problems to the solution. And here I personally would handle it that way, that personally I like to have kids and then to educate them in a certain way, to give like hope to hold the concept, and that would be my personal solution. But that is not a solution for everyone. It's a really personal decision, and but it's like you said, it's a really, really big problem, and the root of it maybe also.
Yeah, it is. It seems, again, it seems like inherently contradictory, so many aspects of it, but I think all of us can agree that the solution is, at least one of the solutions is, to make it as easy as possible for women to have kids and raise them, and have society support that as much as possible. That seems like a non-negotiable. I do want to touch on something else. So speaking of paradoxes, so there's this idea of the female happiness paradox, and basically what it is, it's a measure of happiness between men and women, and I think more or less it's been studied in depth for the past several decades. So following like the sexual revolution and really just the liberation of women. So when they first started measuring this, women actually were happier than men on average. And over time, what's happened is, although both sexes have declined in happiness, women are actually now less happy than men. So not only overall they're less happy, but in relation to men, they're less happy. And so, what do you think? First of all, I mean, have you heard of that stat? And then secondly, what do you think could be a potential cause of that? Because you would expect women to have, as they have more freedom, to be happier, but there's other things potentially going on.
First of all, my question would be, when was this happiness index measured first? Like, was it before the sexual revolution, or was it after it?
I think it started around 1960s and 70s.
With the introduction of birth control, I think.
1960, the happiness was like the women are more happy than men, and then it declined both after.
Correct.
That. Okay. I heard about also a happiness index, but like a really specific one. That means like that women who are not in a relationship, who don't have kids, don't have husband, tend to be more happy, or in those happiness indexes are the people reported most happy. And
sorry,
I mean
can you clarify that? More happy compared to just anyone, or
compared to anyone, to women with children, with families, with husband, to men. I mean, that's an interesting fact that this is really the group, like the most happy group. But referring to your question, why like it could have come to a decline of happiness. I mean, happiness is a really complex feeling, and it has probably a lot of explanations. But that women were more happy like shortly after the sexual liberation, like after the after getting more rights about their body and more rights about their movements, that is pretty clear and that makes sense. But after that, that was about like the second wave of feminism, like after the 1960s. And then after that, we had the third and the fourth waves. And if we connect the happiness now to the feminism, it was, we maybe they saw, okay, it's not that easy. We cannot achieve equal rights with this movement that fast. Maybe that's why the happiness declined. Maybe they realized, okay, the birth control is not the solution to all of our problems, because the birth control and is also a problem with hormones, and stuff like this.
What I read actually is that the birth control, hormonal birth control, is linked to depression in women, which is, I think, there's been kind of a trend lately of women trying to get off or being more hesitant to take that kind of birth control. But
that's totally right. But we are getting distracted. I'm sorry. But I think maybe if we connect it to feminism, it's like the recognition, like things don't work out that easy just by introducing a movement or birth control or more rights. It's not like we have equality in a few years. Maybe it's connected.
Well, I think so. I think some of the problem might be linked to equality, or actually women overperforming compared to men. And so one of the stats that I've seen, and this goes hand in hand with women now doing better in terms of graduating from college. Like there's more women graduating from college than men. Women, some psychologists would say that they tend to do better in like white collar environments because they tend to be maybe more conscientious and agreeable. They tend to be like better employees, quite frankly.
But I don't think white collar environments necessarily reward being conscientious and agreeable. I think that's kind of
it depends on what. Well, so in terms of, okay, so it's tough because there are obviously to kind of rise up the ladder, you do have to be more disagreeable. To negotiate better on your pay, you do have to be more disagreeable. But it's really in comparison to just getting there, and like there's just less men, it seems like, that are suited as well to be in that environment at all, as like a more categorical difference. And so if women start to out earn men, I'm not saying for the same occupation, I'm saying if there's like more women, let's say in white collar positions, because now there's more women that are college educated, like let's say a woman who's working in marketing is making more money than a plumber, then they're potentially out earning this guy, right? And so what I've seen from statistics is that when a woman makes more than a man in a partnership, there's a 50% more likelihood of divorce. And so there's kind of this difference in terms of expectation between the sexes in heterosexual relationships, where a woman is kind of dissatisfied by the lower earning potential of a man, and like that could be one of the contributions to less happiness as women are becoming just more economically independent. Like that could be an inherent quality of economic independence.
I think there is kind of.
But does it surprise you? Go ahead.
I think there is this paradox as well, with a paradox within a paradox, I guess, where as women have become more integrated in the functioning society, I think certain responsibilities have been lifted off the shoulders of men. And I do think there is this illusion at times, and Patty, I'm not saying you were saying this, I think this is kind of in reference to the rhetoric in general, that the patriarchy, like, yes, it benefits men, but it also causes men to live under quite unfortunate and rigorous circumstances themselves, right? So as women's liberation took off, I think certain responsibilities were like lifted off of the collective like masculine blob, and we ourselves became a bit more free, whereas women had to embrace certain realities that weren't necessarily as idealistic or amazing as maybe we all had thought, right? So men are themselves being liberated. There's less pressure on men to perform as fathers, leaders, et cetera, because we're now kind of trying to equally shoulder the burdens. So therefore, men might feel, in fact, happier that the patriarchy is indeed no longer as oppressive to their status in society as well, while women have to step into a greater role of dealing with bullshit, dealing with like nonsense that kind of is out there in the ether to a certain extent.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because when you question it sounds like, yeah, just that men just have benefits from the patriarchy, and it's clearly true. They benefit from it, but they also suffer from it. Like those behaviors of toxic masculinity that lead to those happiness indexes that show more happiness when the man really earns more. Or there also was a study that women tend to lie about their financial income, because in order to make the man feel better, or the partner feel better about his own. And that is like, grounded in the structures, how we work, how the society works. And it's not that just the women suffer from it. It's also, what you mentioned, that it puts a lot of pressure on the men, because it influences like how we all think, like men and women. And it's something that both can benefit from if we change those structures, and if we open up a little bit about it. And this includes also could lead to increasing happiness index. That is also the main goal of it. It's not just feminism and it's the goal that all people can go happier, more content into their lives. That is the goal.
Yeah, there was a video I was watching the other day, and it was somebody that kind of ranting about how could there be a patriarchy if men are sent off to die in war, right? And this reference point was talking about the war in Ukraine, where when Russia invaded in February, they started closing the borders, right? So men couldn't leave the country because they were getting called up for military service, but women were leaving Ukraine. They were moving to France, Germany, UK. But I did find it a little bit interesting. That's like, there cannot possibly be a patriarchy because like men are being oppressed and forced to fight in wars. But then there's also that kind of gap in thinking, I think, where like, well, indeed, what if this is also a symptom of a patriarchy in a system that equally, maybe not equally, but it in different ways oppresses men and women with expectations and kind of rigid parameters that you have to fit into.
Exactly. I'm glad we also talked about the negative consequences that have patriarchy on men, because they are there and they also have to be fighted. It's not just benefits for women; it's also like those benefits that lead from the patriarchy. And it's also when you mentioned before that those happiness indexes are decreasing when women earn more and stuff. I wanted to ask, does it surprise you? Because it's also based on the patriarchy, right? That's how we think, and it's like how we think, how the society, how a partnership should work, that the man is the one bringing the money.
I mean, like, just because society evolves doesn't mean thinking evolves, right? We've addressed that point earlier in the conversation, where we might pass all of the legislation and we might have all of like the constitutional accommodations to equalize the status of gender in a country, but if we're still thinking along like these are the roles, and there's like the cognitive dissonance of like, I am a man, I should be like the main breadwinner, I should be driving the Bugatti, but then here is a successful woman that is driving the Bugatti and I'm not, and I'm sure that creates some sort of like deep-rooted insecurity or cognitive dissonance, I think.
I mean, I think there's there are certain psychological differences between men and women, and it's not clear how both sexes will respond to kind of this more new age gender roles compared to more traditional gender roles. I think that in part could be, it may not just be like, oh, we just need a cultural shift. I think it could be some deeply ingrained psychological characteristics, based on our evolutionary past. And I think that that's definitely a more difficult challenge. Another paradox I want to bring up as well is the paradox of choice. I think this is a great day for paradox.
Men of paradox.
That's the title of the episode right there. Men of paradox.
I'm
Paradox?
glad that the episode about the feminism is called Men of Paradox.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry,
yes,
sorry guys.
Yeah, we have to.
Patty, I was gonna call it feminist gets destroyed by logic and reason. That's what I was. No, but this idea of the paradox of choice is, I think, kind of linked to some studies that I've seen where, people in like arranged marriages or semi-arranged marriages like actually have more relationship satisfaction. And I think that has to do with like the sense of the regret. Like if you have more options, if you're in a candy store and you can pick between 1,000 different candies and you pick like 2 or 3, you might think like, okay, it was good, but what if I chose the other one? And what about all the other ones that I didn't choose, right? And so, whereas if you go to a gas station and their selection is only like 2 or 3 candies, you just choose the best one out of that. I don't know, and you're satisfied. There might be some inherent property of freedom that produces kind of some sort of reduction in well-being due to the regret that we face. I don't know. That's just something I've thought about. What are your thoughts?
I don't think that the well-being really increases with a lack of liberation or having more liberty, more choices. Because maybe they I don't want to say they don't think they're happy, or like I cannot look in their brains or something, but I would always prefer to have more choices in order to have more liberty, because if we limit ourselves in order to have probably or maybe increased happiness, that would mean that would be totally crazy in my opinion. I cannot speak for those who had an arranged marriage, but I mean, if you decide to have a marriage and after it you get divorced, it means that was your decision for a well-being, and just because you're divorced, that does not mean that you're not happy or anything. It means that was your decision for it.
And a lot of arranged marriages just blatantly suck in general. You make it work. There is this kind of you learn how to power through it and build a natural connection. But I still think there's
so much. Yeah, there's so much pressure on those on women and men in this sense, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy. It's just, for me, it's an idea of the past, and also the concept of arranged marriage and paying for women to as a tradition is things that doesn't go hand in hand with my ideas of how life
I think what's interesting is now that for example, marriage is less about economics. As people become more affluent, there might be a tendency to now look for a partner that kind of feels like the more romantic, idealized romantic notions of what a partner should be, as opposed to someone who's who's like a stable breadwinner, or
Mhm.
or maybe just purely for the sake of like family status or whatever the reasoning was in the past. Now that you have this freedom and this different motive, I think we might find that it's a lot more challenging to find people that we really get along with, that we really want to be married with. I mean, there's again another sort of, again, it just kind of goes back to the arranged marriage thing. Like, if you didn't have a choice, if you didn't know any better, like there's something about that where you might just be more content. But now that we have the freedom to choose and we have these stronger preferences and higher expectations of what it means to have like a good, fulfilling partner, again, it's just one of like the paradoxes of becoming a more developed, free individual, like maximizing the individual type of society.
I don't
And
actually
I think
think we have that sort of diversity of choice. I think, in fact, we are, and maybe that was like a limited moment from like the 1990s until like towards 2008. But I think the socioeconomic circumstances are like effectively fucked for both men and women, where we are increasingly relying on a partner that could simultaneously function as a breadwinner for both men and women. Because, let's talk about like home ownership. I don't know what the situation is like in Germany, Patty. Maybe in Central America, it's like totally chill. But like in the US, very, very difficult to buy like a house or any property without two stable incomes, right? Very difficult to make any sort of like financial commitments within our current circumstances. And it looks like it's just going to be like this for the foreseeable future. So I actually think that now there's like, people are trying to find like that source of stability from both genders because we're all fucked, which maybe that's the ultimate egalitarianism where everybody's screwed. That's kind of the universal equality to a certain extent.
What inflation does to an MF,
But it's really true. It's impossible to just like buy some property without two incomes, and it's true. It's different in different sides of the world, but in Germany it's the same.
How much is the what is the expectation in Germany if you're trying to buy like even a condo, like a 2-bedroom condo, like in, I don't know.
What is a condo?
It's like a condominium.
It's a flat.
Like an apartment. Flat. Sorry, yeah.
To buy, I'm
like in
really
Munich, like a decent part of Munich or Frankfurt or somewhere. I don't know.
Part of Munich.
Yeah, I am not sure about the price situation, but Munich is like one of the most expensive cities in Germany, and even if you just want to buy a flat, it can be millions.
Damn.
Millions.
Wow.
Okay, well, I guess we're all moving to like
Saarbrücken if it's a really nice flat.
That's a really nice flat. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, but $500,000, I don't know.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, I guess we're not moving to Germany.
I'm not there.
Out of the question.
No time soon.
All right. Well, I think I think this has been a pretty healthy discussion. I think we touched on many of the topics that we wanted to touch on. I think I think if people just discuss these things more with one another, they can see that they're not that far apart, right? Like we're not really disagreeing a whole lot. And I think even people that are maybe kind of, I don't know, more conservative or more liberal on this topic than any of us, I think the gap here is not as large as it seems, like in social media and in the online spaces. Like it seems like there's a lot of antagonization of both sides, but I think if you just have a conversation, it's not as perilous as it seems.
Yeah, it's really true. Like we have to like get out of our bubbles and just keep talking. And what you said at one moment of our conversation was like, maybe there's some respect missing And I really thought, like, yeah, maybe that is one of the key points, because if you respect a person, you pay the person equal, like a man. If you respect your person, you don't violate that person. If you respect it, you many persons are many cases maybe are different of you. And also in those conversations, respect is one key point, I guess. And for the end, I have like a little recommendation, because now we talked a lot about like how things are right now or could be in the future, and not about much how what was in the past, or how feminism evolved in the past. And I lately read a book from Verena Weidenbach. It's a book about it's called Untold Stories, and it's about how women created this modern world we live in. And it's about stories of women who achieved great things in the past. And they researched, they wrote literature, they started new eras in art and stuff, and they have not been recognized for their achievements, but men, in contrary, have stolen those achievements and presented them as their own. It's really, really interesting, and finally makes visible the contribution women have made to our world in the past, which I'm really into feminism, and I really did not know many things. For example, like, it was not Walt Disney who created the first animated film. It was Lotte Reiniger. It was Ada Lovelace who described the first computer program. Also, a really famous example is Rosalind Franklin. She was the researcher who discovered the DNA and its structure, and just discovered that it's a double helix structure, and was not James Watson and Francis Crick, but they got the Nobel Prize. Like, stories like this, which are really, really interesting, and give credits to women who achieved things in the past. That's a recommendation.
The person who developed CRISPR was also a woman, I believe. So CRISPR is a huge technology. You're familiar with CRISPR? The genetic editing.
No, that's
It's a gene editing tool that was developed, I think, in the last decade, and it was developed by a woman. But it's potentially like the most promising technology right now in like gene therapy or whatever field you want to call it.
Two scientists from China, men, went forward and like started like just using this like gene alteration therapy without any sort of like medical consensus or anything like that.
No, they totally they disregarded like safety guidelines and regulations. They went gung ho, and I think part of that motivation is to seek status and fame for not necessarily developing the technology, but using it in a groundbreaking way
on a human.
But on a human.
It was the same story that the researcher developed it, and the woman didn't get the credits, and the man came and took it, or
no. She got the credit. It's just the men took that technology and ran with it and tried to. I think what they wanted to do is apply it to like human gene editing, and maybe seek status that way and overshadow. It could be, I don't know if they cared so much for the woman, but they just wanted status in general.
They wanted to be the first to use the technology in human trials. Before there wasn't any like consensus on the medical community yet. Like there's still like uncertainty as to what like the long-term effects of gene editing are on like a human as they grow. But I don't know if that was necessarily tied to the discourse between men and women, but it was certainly tied to like we have to be the first to launch this sort of like gene treatment therapy, and we don't know what's going to happen to the twins.
I think we should follow this. But this book was always like about like women achieving something and men stoning this.
It's fascinating.
That makes it really interesting.
Isn't like William Shakespeare? Isn't there like a theory that William Shakespeare was actually like either stealing some shit from women? Yeah. Well, a babe. Totally.
About Shakespeare, I'm not sure, but Bertolt Brecht, he was really famous for giving like voices to normal people in those in his theater plays. And he had it was not his wife, like a pareja, like a person, a wife, but not married. I'm not sure. Like
Pati, all these all sound like German names that you're giving us. Is there some bias here? They're all like German female.
But Bertolt Brecht is like, of course, German, but like really famous, like worldwide famous. It's biased.
Sorry, I live in America. The world is only the border
around the United States. Yeah, if it's not American, it ain't good.
Okay. But Shakespeare, you mentioned from the UK, so
UK is basically America. We Anglo-Saxon. Like...
Yeah, but what I just wanted to mention was like all the ideas who made Bertolt Brecht really famous came from this.
Well, I think it's a good point to make, because I've heard this before, and it's like, oh well, why are all the inventors male, or all the groundbreaking scientists male? It's like, well, because women weren't allowed to do anything, more or less.
I thought the same. I asked myself the same, and I was like, okay, it's sad because of patriarchy, and they are not allowed, but they did it, and in many cases they just didn't get the credit, and it was like went down the book from. It was a really that's why I wanted to mention him.
Go ahead, Andrey.
I think one of the more like fascinating things that I've been reading about lately is again, like to my question earlier about socialism and how it impacts like gender roles. But there's the case of Valentina Tereshkova in the Soviet Union. She was the first woman in space, but she didn't want to go to space. Like she didn't want to, but they made her, because they said like oh, there must be a woman in space first, and that woman will be you. And she was like fucking like, no, I don't want. And they sent her up there, and she's the only person that went up to space, saw the Earth, came back more conservative, and like now she's still alive, and she's like making life hell for everybody because they didn't listen to her. She's like, no, I don't want. Like, no, you have to go. It's just
that's so crazy.
Since we're name dropping, I guess I should name drop an Armenian woman, but I have nothing.
This is where we establish our like feminist credentials by naming women we know.
I am exposed as a fraud. So
well.
Well, Pati, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything you want to discuss?
I think I'm good. I think I forgot a bit to mention when we talked about the equal pay gap. We just talked about women in general, but I just wanted to add that you cannot generalize like all women in general, because the statistics about the equal pay gap says, like, for example, you mentioned that women in general earn like, how much was it? 82 cents for every dollar a man earns, but it's not for all women the same. For example, black women earn like 69 cents. People from Latina women 57 cents, and Native woman 59 cents. So I just wanted to have a focus also on different.
Wow, so the white women are skewing the data set. Yeah. Totally.
I mean. Yeah.
So white women are the problem. White women are the problem. I think we figured it out on this.
I think white men, but
that's a great point.
Anyway,
I think like
I just
there's
wanted
an entire.
To mention
Go
sorry,
ahead, Pati.
That was no. I just your connection was late. I didn't hear you speaking. Just could say it again. Sorry.
Yeah, well, no, that's things we deal with, I suppose.
I think. Did you ask him to repeat what he said? I think you missed what he said, but
because
you had
the
a point,
connection was
Andrey.
bad.
Oh yeah, sorry, my signal is getting loose. I was gonna say that to Pati's point, it is quite the layers of how deep we can go. I can't imagine. What the gender pay gap is for Native women from tribes that have been like systemically like destroyed. I'm sure the data from that's going to be far more dark and gruesome than
Yeah,
the average.
just to also
Yeah.
consider,
Mhm.
different classes and cultural backgrounds. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was important. But except from this, I think we covered a lot, and just wanted to thank you for giving me that platform, for inviting me, and for the really, really interesting conversation with you guys.
We would love to have you back at some point. Who knows what continent you'll be on then, and we'll get an even more interesting perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patty.
I'm here.
Appreciate having you on.
Okay. Levon, I thought that was a pretty damn interesting conversation. What did you think?
Man, it was good. It was good. I think people from all sides could take away something from this.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this off air, but I think trying to have these conversations with, as we mentioned on the show, like a basis of respect to one another, I think that's really the most productive way to go about it. We didn't agree on everything. We certainly introduced some pretty contentious arguments that opponents of feminism might use, but I think that was certainly navigated by Pati with grace and poise, and it really let us, I think, have a very productive discussion that certainly we don't really see on other channels. Maybe that's like a plug to us.
And I think it also left room for further discussion. I mean, there's some of these paradoxes just inherent, I feel like, to all the good that has come about from, maybe post-Enlightenment thinking, from women's liberation. I think it would be very interesting to explore that further at some point, because it is also, when you tie that to the birth rates, like it is going to become more and more relevant as society implodes.
Yeah, I mean,
from that
the
demographic
crisis is really real, and I think depending on how our respective countries and governments respond to the demographic crisis, it's really going to determine certainly the status of women in the future. We mentioned kind of this like Handmaid's Tale situation, but we would like there to be a continued push towards a level of equality, I think, across all genders, belief structures, things like that. But that's not necessarily guaranteed with how governments respond. And I think oftentimes it's a lot easier for policymakers to start backsliding. So we'll see, and we can always revisit the topic as we learn more about what the hell's going on in the world.
Absolutely. And again, if you enjoy the show, subscribe, comment, like, help feed the algorithm. And we will have plenty of more content.
We are but slaves to the algorithm. Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will talk to you again soon.
Take care.